Hi guys, my name is Joe Winchland. I work for the Message Trust and I head up a project called Respect Me in the Northeast that goes into schools. It's an awesome project. I'm sure Adam will put the link for you to look into that more if you want. I've been a Christian for 7 years and I've never really massively been in the book of Proverbs until really this series, and I'm just like, it's awesome. It is so deep and brimming with wisdom. So I've been so blessed by this series. I was going to read out the whole of Proverbs 11, but it's very, very long. So I'd really encourage you to do that in your own time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out just some of the verses that particularly spoke to me. Reading through it all, what I felt from it was the whole thing of that it is actually not to live for ourselves is wisdom, but to live for the good of others. And the whole thing about we're actually blessed to be a blessing. And when we are a blessing, we are blessed. It is actually for our good, and actually God's best for our life is our best. God's way of doing things is actually really good for our lives. And also I just got from it, like, this Proverbs 11, it's about living righteously, not greedy, not dishonestly, not at the expense of others, but generously, looking to live blameless and being a blessing. And it's really living as God is generous. His very character is generous, and looking to live that ourselves so that we can be representations of God to the people around us in this world. So as his image bearers, so hopefully through our lives, people can see God and think, oh, gosh, I believe God is real. Because I can see the goodness of him in our lives. Which is what we want, isn't it? So I'm going to dive in. Proverbs 11:2 says, "When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom." And when I think of pride is really rejecting the grace of God, isn't it? Hence the word disgrace, the opposite. And I want to always be in the grace of God, not trying to just do things myself, but living in his goodness and his grace. And I was just thinking about this, and it's about not being full of, when we're not being full of ourselves, we're able to hear God's voice, hear his direction, his wisdom. And I love this quote that I've heard Daniel Calendar, a big inspiration of mine, say quite a lot. And I think he quotes it from D.L. Moody. And he says this: "God sends no one away empty except those who are full of themselves." And going back to that verse, it says, "But with humility comes wisdom." And when we recognize actually our need for God, we have access to the wisdom of the creator of the whole universe and the creator of us. And with pride, the really obvious thing is, I don't need help. I just do it all on my own. Me, myself, and I. But actually, as Christians, there's a more subtle thing when we just seem to do things in our own strength without God. And do you know what? We can all fall into it. And we all know it's just not good. And that's why we need to guard our hearts against that. Because I know when I do you know what? Life's hard. Life feels just a real, real struggle. Verse 1 and verse 3 says this. Verse 1 says, "The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with him." And verse 3 says, "The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity, their double-mindedness." And I was just thinking, obviously, integrity is so important, living honestly and right. And I was thinking about, like, people who are involved in crime, whether they are caught or not, they're constantly looking over their shoulders with a sense of paranoia, really, that sense of almost waiting for the day they're going to be caught. Whether that day comes or not, there's that waiting. And really it's an inner imprisonment. It's a slavery. And God actually, what does God desire for us? To be free, to be blameless. And in the Gospels it says, what good is it to gain the whole world, yet forfeit the soul? And basically, when we're being dishonest, we're sacrificing that peace that we can have, and carrying that lack of peace around with ourselves. I mean, peace is priceless, absolutely priceless, and we don't want to trade it in for anything, because we carry ourselves around with us. Obviously, we are 24/7. We don't want to trade it in for material gains or anything else. It's just not worth it at all. And I know that from my own life, when I struggled massively from the age of 17 to 23, really struggled with anxiety and depression, and the one thing I wanted in life was peace. You could have thrown loads of money at me, whatever, riches beyond, made me say, here's £1 billion, but I tell you what, I would have wanted more than anything. I wanted peace. That is what I wanted more than anything. And the peace of God cannot be bought or sold. It is priceless. And I love the verse in the Bible where it says, it's for freedom that Christ has set us free. Okay, verse 7, it says, hopes placed in mortals die with them. All the promise of their power comes to nothing. Just a quick thought on that one. Hopes placed in mortals die with them. And it just makes me think of the Enlightenment period, like 19th century, and the philosopher Nietzsche, who declared God is dead. But actually it ended up, Nietzsche died and is dead, but God is still very much alive. Put our hope not in the wisdom of people, but in the wisdom of God, that sure foundation. I see the time is ticking and there is so much to share. So I'm going to move to verse 17. It says this: those who are kind benefit themselves, but the cruel bring ruin on themselves. Those who are kind benefit themselves. And going back to that phrase, God's best is our best. When we are kind, we're just living in the Spirit of God. There's nothing better than the Spirit of God. Verse 19 says this: truly, I need my water. Truly, the righteous attain life, but whoever pursues evil finds death. And I love that, and it just brings me back to John 10:10. For the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I, Jesus, come that they may have life and have it to its fullness. And life is found in living righteous. How is this? We're living like Jesus, empowered by his Spirit. And I love that we are actually made righteous because we receive Jesus' righteousness, Jesus' goodness, Jesus' without blemishness, if that's even a word, but you get what I'm talking about. It's Jesus's enoughness that we clothe ourselves in, not how well we think that we are doing or not, which we can so fall into and so easily, but the fact that we are perfectly loved. And our standard isn't based on what we think, but what God says about us, which is beautiful. Verse 20, it says, he delights in those whose ways are blameless. And it is pleasing to God as we walk as his children in his way. He's just delighted. He's like, yes, they are thriving. It's like, when I'm walking in God's way, he's like, yes, go Joe. Or if it's Adam, he's like, yes, go on Adam, I love it. Because for God so loves this world, he wants us to be his representations. He's complete, he's perfect. And he wants everyone else to live in that freedom and that joy and that peace and that goodness of him. Verse 24-25 says this: one person gives freely, yet gains even more. Happy days. Yet another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. Let me tell you a little story. So about this and generosity. My wife, she used to live in Uganda. She worked at New Hope in Uganda, and she looked after and loved on this special needs children in there. And there's this guy called Kakande, absolute legend, who had special needs, and he had so many caps. Basically, probably most people who went, he was like, "I like your cap. Can I have your cap?" Kind of vibe. Anyway, I obviously went with a cap. The cap I had, honestly, it's my favourite cap of all time. It was just those who appreciate a good cap, you know what I'm talking about. I was like, oh, I love my cap. It's precious to me. Anyway, Kakande loved my hat, and I felt a prompting from the Lord to give Kakande my hat. And do you know what? It did feel like a bit of a cost. But I said, no, God, I want to give it. And anyway, he had it with, he obviously gratefully took it with about the 30 other caps that he had. But do you know what? How blessed I was to see the joy that he got from that cap and having that. And do you know what? I'm still glad that I don't have that cap, but Kakande's got that cap. And I was so blessed in the process. And just a bit on kind of generosity, etc. And especially about finances now. At times, giving for me hasn't made sense, whether feeling by the Holy Spirit to bless or to continue regularly giving. And why is this? It's because the bank balance didn't always make sense, because it didn't look like things were adding up, because the reality was things weren't adding up. But somehow God does his thing, somehow God did his thing, and it all worked out. And you know what? It's definitely all that trusting in God with finances, etc. has definitely brought a closeness with God through trusting him in this. And it's helpful for me to remember, actually, everything in my life is from him. Anyway, my life, the air I'm breathing is from him. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for God. My finances. So to actually hold on to things tightly and just for my own gain is unwise. And if it's out of it's maybe that can be when we hold things tightly, it's out of a fear that we won't have enough. But God is our provider, full stop. And it's freeing when we have generous hearts, when we are open-handed, because we are then free to bless. How cool is that? To be a blessing. God has enabled us to be the blessing to the people on earth through his strength, through his power. Because as Christians, what are we? We're rescued ones, shining a light on who Jesus is, so others can hopefully enjoy that same relationship with Jesus and to know the one who refreshes our soul. Anyway, I hope that blessed you. Take care. Hopefully meet some of you great people sometime. Goodbye.